Joining us, director of the China Center at the Brookings Institution, the author of that piece, Ryan Haas, author and managing editor of Political Playbook, Jack Blanchard, and Washington Post columnist, and senior fellow for national security studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, Max Boot. Ryan, I do want to begin with you because we ended with your piece in The Atlantic, and I found it so striking, as I said, because when we think of our politics and the world stage and foreign policy, we think in four-year terms. Just make it through these next 3 years. Things might change during the next round. China does not think that way. So what do you make of how each of these countries came out of the summit today?
I think that you're absolutely right in the way that you frame this, Katie. The Chinese view the Trump administration as a continuation of trend. From their perspective, it is a reflection of the fact that the United States continues to be a declining but still very dangerous country that is trying to cling to its privileged position by lashing out overseas. And so from that vantage, the goal is to just sort of, from China's standpoint, be steady in its course, trusting that trends are working in its favor. And if you look at the first thing that is reflected in the Chinese readout of the meeting, President Xi told Donald Trump that the transformations unseen in a century are accelerating. What that means is he is saying that he thinks that China is ascendant and that America is receding from the center of the world stage. And so I think that this was a pretty muscular, pretty confident expression by Xi Jinping to start out a meeting with President Trump. But at the end of the day, I don't think that either leader was really making an effort to try to embarrass the other or treat the other as a supplicant. Xi Jinping showed great respect to President Trump, taking him to the Temple of Heaven, treating him with deference and the state banquet. And President Trump similarly lavished praise upon President Xi throughout the day. So
do we have folks, Max, in our government right now, within Donald Trump's foreign policy team, were they there, that understand that about China's motivations and China's desires and are helping this administration navigate that?
Well, I don't think that regional expertise or, in fact, expertise of any kind is something that the Trump administration is noted for. I mean, it's really an administration that has purged many of the experts from the State Department, many of the experts from the NSC, and has instituted very personal rule by President Trump, his family, and his friends. So it's really unclear to me what the president or those around him actually understand about China. But I hope that they at least understand what a weak position they are in right now in dealing with China, largely because of President Trump's self-inflicted errors, whether it was his precipitous haste to start a trade war with China last year, and then Trump had to back down after President Xi threatened to withhold rare earth minerals that the U.S. economy needs to function, or the even greater blunder that President Trump has made this year by launching this war with Iran. And just yesterday, you had the Washington Post reporting that the Joint Chiefs of Staff have concluded in an intelligence estimate that the war is greatly hurting the U.S. vis-a-vis China in all sorts of ways, not the least of which is we're using up all the munitions against Iran that we need to fight China. And we're also plunging the world into this energy crisis and looking like a very militaristic, out-of-control country, allowing China, of all people, the Chinese, to posture as being kind of the stable adults in the global system. So, I don't know if what the Trump administration understands about their dealings with China, but I think the objective reality is they've greatly weakened America's position in the global rivalry with China.
Jack, you've done some reporting on this, Politico has, regarding who's left in Donald Trump's cabinet and his inner circle that remains a China hawk. Who is left?
Not many voices is the truth. Donald Trump came onto the political scene, of course, 10 years ago, talking a very tough game on China. And we've seen flashes of that in policy terms over the years, particularly in terms of tariffs. But the truth is, he comes to this summit looking relatively dovish towards China in the sort of Republican framework, if I can put it that way. And, you know, the sort of lavish praise that we were hearing him heap upon President Xi overnight, calling him a great leader. You know, this guy is a dictator of a country with an appalling human rights record, but there's no mention of that. Donald Trump's very keen to sort of be seen to being as close to Xi as he can do. He wants to be seen to be lavishing praise on him. That is his style, and particularly with leaders he sees as a strongman. That is not the sort of talk that the hawkish China wing of the Republican Party would have wanted to see. But many of those people have been swept away. Many of the people from the first term who were advising Donald Trump on China are not there anymore. Of course, he fell out with them one after another. And we're seeing a very different approach to China now. Sometimes, you know, Donald Trump will get on Truth Social and be very aggressive in a social media posting. But if you look at the reality of where we are, we look at the dynamic between the two leaders overnight, and you look at, as we just heard, the way that President Xi felt emboldened to put out what I thought was a surprisingly aggressive statement following their meeting, how he'd warned Donald Trump about the implications of a fallout about Taiwan. That shows an emboldened president of China, and again, really something that old hawkish wing of the Republican Party would not have enjoyed watching.
Yeah, Jack, do you have a sense of where this administration stands on Taiwan? What about that arms package, whether they might be considering changing the language from our posture that we've had now for many decades toward Taiwan and China's desire for it?
Everything they say in private is that there is going to be no change. All of the briefing that we've been given, all the conversations that I and my colleagues have had, is that there is not going to be a change at this summit. There is no plan for a change. That's what they've been telegraphing. You heard it from Secretary of State Marco Rubio last night. But you know, this is Donald Trump we're talking about. And when you're talking about the very fine nuances of diplomatic language, and it really is a very fine line that America walks with Taiwan, you know, how far America goes in terms of recognizing it as a separate entity from China and so on. It doesn't take much to suddenly change that. And, you know, Donald Trump is famously not a fine details guy. He's not a diplomacy guy. Yeah. He has other attributes, if you like. And so, you know, he is capable of just shifting these things. And if you talk to other Asian allies of America in private, diplomats who represent those countries, that is their biggest concern, is almost that it happens by accident or on a whim rather than some big strategic shift.
Yeah, you just wonder if the people around Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself understands China. They thought they understood Iran. That has not gone well. Ryan, let me ask you about why we focus so much on Taiwan. We hear about it. Just explain exactly why we have such an interest in Taiwan and why we might stand in the way if China tries to take it.
Well, Katie, I mean, I think the first reason is that Americans sort of value a David versus Goliath, type of struggle. And Taiwan is certainly the underdog, a population of 23 million people, 90 miles across a strait from 1.4 billion people on the mainland. But, you know, Taiwan is also a flourishing democracy. It is the bellwether for America's credibility of its alliance and security commitments. So goes our support for Taiwan. So goes the credibility of our alliance commitments. But importantly, Taiwan is also the epicenter for the global semiconductor industry. 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors are produced in Taiwan. That is the inputs that fuel the AI engine, which is driving America's economic growth today.
And if we lose access to that, or we're beholden to China on that, what happens?
There is no plan B. There is no other alternative source of advanced semiconductor equipment and production in the world. And so the global economy and the American economy would be significantly derailed in such a scenario.
Ryan, who did the president go to China to represent? There are questions about this because he brought a lot of American business CEOs, a lot of chip makers, including NVIDIA. Elon Musk was there. Tim Cook was there. His son was also there, Eric. Who, from your perspective, who do you believe Donald Trump was representing in this meeting with Xi Jinping?
It's interesting, Katie, if you look at the composition of CEOs that traveled with the president this time relative to 2017, the last trip that the president took to Beijing, it is very heavily weighted towards tech leaders today. And the common thread amongst almost all these tech leaders who are traveling with President Trump is they all have a market access or a regulatory issue with China that they're trying to get untangled. And so, I think that this reflects the fact that President Trump values greatly the support that he enjoys from leaders, tech titans, and wants to keep them on sides.